Yeah.
And perhaps that sort of leads on to kind of another thing we want to talk about in terms of sort of testing and vaccinations. I think, yes, hopefully sort of if numbers start to come down and stuff, that will just help. And I think in terms of, there's been a lot of talk, I think generally in Hong Kong, as to whether you can require employees to take COVID tests. Can you require them to take vaccinations? Do they need to report to the employer as to whether they've been vaccinated or not? I appreciate this is all sort of new stuff, but is there, and there's sort of no precedent to it, sort of what's your view in terms of kind of what employers can and cannot request?
Yeah, well, I suppose we've kind of hidden this one down the order, but I mean, this is really the this is the sort of hot topic at the moment, and you know, there's been a lot of conflicting and in some cases quite sort of inflammatory information in the media about all of this, and it's, you know, it's obviously a very sensitive and quite complex topic, because you know, you've got a situation where for employers want to have an environment where it's as safe as possible to be having people working. And I mean, you know, particularly in the sort of healthcare and food and beverage sectors, you know, this is where people are coming into contact with a lot of other people in terms of the way that they're going about doing their jobs. It's, you know, it's a major issue, but there's kind of there's balancing, I suppose there's balancing the safety element of this with the particular sensitivities that individuals may have with regard to either being tested or currently with the vaccination process that's being rolled out. And I mean, the sort of key, I suppose the key legal points are that, I mean, there's no statutory right for an employer to mandate or force an employee to either take a test or to have a vaccination. So in principle, the answer is that you can't force people to do those things. But then you get into the area of thinking, well, you know, is there another basis to come at this from? And the one that's talked about most is really the fact that that employees are required to by law to follow the lawful and reasonable directions of their employers. So the question becomes, is it with testing, for example, is it you know, is it lawful, and more importantly, is it reasonable to ask someone to take a test? And I think in a lot of cases there's a good argument for saying, look, it is reasonable because, you know, we want to have as safe a working environment as we can, and we want to make sure particularly that people who are facing customer facing and maybe meeting a lot of people to perform their roles face to face, that we know that people are safe to do that. But then equally, so while that seems a very reasonable argument, on the other hand, you know, there are kind of legitimate sensitivities that I think people have on the basis of medical conditions, or one you know, really sort of, for me, quite poignant one is you know, relates to people who say, well, I'm a single parent, and I'm worried about sort of taking a test, you know, perhaps at the workplace where I'm required to do it, and then if I test positive, being taken straight off to be put into quarantine, and, you know, having to make arrangements for your child or children as a single parent. And so on that basis, I know that a number of people have been very, very concerned about doing this, not because they don't understand the underlying point about safety and trying to create a safe environment, but just thinking about the impact that this would have on them as families. And I think that's something that that employers have to be alive to, and that, you know, that's the sort of thing that could well come up in situations where, you know, people, for example, with restaurants or school teachers, and you've got these sort of conflicting dynamics where you've probably got you know, the governors of schools and so on wanting to be able to reassure parents that that they're taking all the measures that they possibly can to make sure that the the school environment is safe, and yet at the same time, you know, as teachers, you've got situations where you might have those kind of sensitivities. So I think, you know, the short answer is that most people are sort of, you know, most of the emphasis seems to be around encouraging people to do these things rather than actually forcing them to do so. And as you sort of come on to vaccinations, it's, you know, it's a similar kind of scenario. And the one thing which, you know, sitting here in the UK, is sort of quite starkly different, is the fact that here in the UK there's been enormous take up of the vaccinations, whereas in Hong Kong, as things stand, it seems that it's been a lot slower in terms of the number of people voluntarily coming forward to actually have the vaccines. And, you know, and so the same legal principles come up, and you know, in principle you can't force someone to have the to take the vaccine, but certainly you know, you can encourage people to do so. I think it's in situations where people are encouraging employees to do so, you also need to be careful in terms of exactly how you go about that. I've seen in recent weeks a couple of company communications where people have drafted something which is probably just a bit too full on in terms of what they're saying. I mean, you need to be careful where you're saying, for example, you know, you should get the vaccination because it's completely safe, or saying that, you know, the risks are infinitesimally small, and so on. Just, I think, being, you know, even if you're just encouraging people to take it, just making sure that you're not making any statements that you know, that actually, well, A, may not be true entirely, and secondly, that could leave you with potential liability. So, for example, if someone did take a vaccination and suffered serious complications, there might be a possibility of them bringing a claim against the employer if they said, well, I was reassured by my employer that it's completely safe, and I did it on that basis. So, you know, those time, you know, in terms of encouraging people to have the vaccinations, I think there's you know, there's also that particular point. But it is very difficult, because, I mean, on the other hand, employers also have you know, have common law duties, as well as under the Occupational Safety and Health Ordinance, to provide a safe working environment for employees. So you know, so people are obviously saying it would be better if you have vaccinations. I saw a survey reported which suggested that, you know, there was something like 14% of employers had said that you know, they were going to make it sort of they were going to make it sort of official that people had to have a vaccination before they could start working again. I think this was the direction of it was really towards sort of restaurants and food and beverage. But the survey also said that I think there were a much higher, more than 50% of employers had said that that they were going to encourage people to do so, rather than actually force people to do so. Sure. And it's, you know, it's another area where potentially there's I mean, aside from the sort of purely legal arguments, there's also there's also questions around kind of reputation and so on. And if you're seen to be someone who an employer that forces people to have the vaccinations, how does that sort of play out in terms of in terms of sort of reputation in the marketplace and
Okay.
so on. So quite a lot to think about.